My mom's new husband takes his kids and are on vacation, leaving me home alone without saying a word. So I go to stay with my dad, and everything spirals out of control. I'm a 16-year-old guy, and I'm in high school right now. My mom married my stepdad Eddie 2 years ago. My mom is 40, and he's 42. My parents never got married. I was actually the result of a really short fling after college that they thought would end in a couple of months, but then my mom got pregnant. She didn't want to terminate the pregnancy, so she had me. My dad also wanted to be a part of my life, so they have shared custody, and I switch homes every month. I spend the year alternating between my mother and my father, splitting my time equally between them. I love my parents, and I know both of them have made a lot of sacrifices for me to be close to them. The first and biggest one is that they've had to live in the same city for years so that the commute between the two houses isn't too difficult. I didn't know about this earlier, but now I know that both of my parents have had to give up on multiple opportunities to advance in their careers just because they needed to remain in the same city for my sake. My mom also apparently had to reject several men who were head over heels for her because she wanted to focus on raising me instead of getting married and dealing with balancing a husband, her work life, and her personal life. I know these things now, thanks to Eddie, indirectly. He's not exactly the best stepfather one could ask for, and my mother had to tell me all of this to make me accept him. She thinks that if she could make so many sacrifices for my sake, I should at least be able to return the favor a little and accept Eddie. I don't know how that works because I didn't ask her to make these sacrifices for me. She could have easily just terminated the pregnancy or let my father take over raising me entirely. But anyway, I never argued with her about any of this because I love her and want her to be happy, so I was ready to accept Eddie even though he's not a very nice guy. By not a nice guy, I don't mean he's mean to me. I just mean he doesn't like me, and he doesn't bother to hide it. I don't know what kind of 42-year-old has issues with a 16-year-old guy, but he definitely does. I don't know why he doesn't like me. I've never done anything to piss him off. In fact, I've always tried to be nice to him because that's how my family raised me, to be nice to everyone, even when they show you that they don't like you. He never speaks to me rudely or makes comments about me because he doesn't speak to me at all. He pretends I don't exist in the family, and this has been going on for the past 3 years. I literally have no idea what I did to piss him off, but one day he just decided he wasn't going to speak to me and would act like I wasn't there. It's the weirdest thing in the world, and I'm not used to this kind of treatment. It's like he's giving me the cold shoulder for something, but I don't know what it is, so I can't even fix my behavior. My mother says that's just how he is. He doesn't have a problem with me, but he doesn't necessarily like me either. However, I feel like if you don't like someone, there should be a reason for it, especially when you're 42 and the other person is just 16. I guess it has something to do with me being my mother's first child, or whatever. I don't even know. The bottom line is that he doesn't like me, and he's made it very obvious. Earlier, we used to get along okay. The first couple of times he came over, he would ask me questions about my life, and I would politely answer. But after one visit, he just decided he wasn't going to speak to me anymore. It was random, and I didn't understand why. I didn't question it at first because I thought maybe he had just forgotten to say hi. But then it happened so many times that it became hard to ignore. I even asked my mother if I had done something to make him angry because he was acting like I wasn't there, turning his face away every time I entered a room. She just said he was trying to wrap his head around having to deal with me being there, as he had only dated women without kids. I found that hard to believe because he has 2 sons, one is 15, and the other is 12. Their mother passed away in an accident after the younger sibling was born. Also, it wasn't true that I'd be there all the time because, as I mentioned, I go to my dad's house every other month. Anyway, a few months passed that way, and eventually, I just accepted that this was how he was, and he wasn't going to speak to me anymore. After a year of being in a relationship, he proposed to my mother, and they got married a few months later. After their marriage, Eddie moved into our house with his kids. Before that, I'd only met his children a couple of times, and they, too, had been taught by their father not to speak to me. It was so crazy, and I don't even know how I dealt with it for so long. For years, in fact. Before getting married, Eddie and my mother lived separately because Eddie's mother was really sick and lived with him. After the marriage, he moved her in with his sister, so he moved in with my mom and brought his children. I don't know if any of you guys have experienced this, but it's really not easy living with people who won't talk to you and pretend you don't exist. I had to put up with it, and it made me feel really bad, like I was some kind of criminal based on how they treated me. And the worst part is I never got to find out what I did wrong in the first place. Years passed, and their behavior didn't change. I was used to Eddie not speaking to me whenever he came to visit my mother, which was quite frequent. After they got married, I got used to him and his kids living with me and not speaking to me. Every time I'd go to my mother's place, I had to mentally prepare to only talk to her for the next couple of weeks. She was the only person who would speak to me in that house, and everyone else acted like I was invisible. It was hurtful, but I did want to spend time with my mother, so I dealt with it because I knew she wasn't going to talk to Eddie about it. I had tried to convince her many times to talk to him and get to the bottom of this, or at least try to solve it, but she told me she'd already spoken to him, and there were personal reasons she couldn't disclose that explained why he refused to acknowledge my presence in the house. She also told me I'd have to suck it up and deal with it. If I tried to argue or stand up for myself, she'd get emotional and tell me I was being ungrateful, overlooking the fact that she had made so many sacrifices for me. She'd say I should give Eddie a pass and deal with his behavior for her sake. I wanted to fight with her but didn't want to hurt her feelings. I never even told my father about any of this because I knew that if he found out, he would be very upset and would definitely drag my mother for it. They were very different people and had very different ideas on how to raise me, so they kept having little arguments and fights. But I knew that something this big would probably lead to my father filing for full custody or something extreme. I didn't want to stir up drama, so I avoided telling him and pretended everything was fine with my mother and her new family. Eddie and my mother had been together for a year before they got married, and they've been living together for 2 years now. So, I've been putting up with this sort of behavior for 3 years, and I've been stretched very thin. Recently, something happened that really pushed me over the edge, and I decided I was no longer going to put up with it. Last month, I was supposed to spend the month at my mother's house, and as usual, Eddie and his kids ignored me. I was already going through a rough patch because I'd been fighting with a couple of friends from school, and I wasn't in the right headspace. About 2 weeks ago, I woke up one morning and realized the house was completely empty, and I started to panic. Up until the night before, everything had seemed normal, or as normal as it gets at my mother's house. They were talking to each other and ignoring me, but there was no mention of them going anywhere. When I woke up the next morning and saw the house was empty, I immediately called my mother to ask what was going on. Thankfully, she answered. When I asked her what they were playing at, she told me that she and the kids had gone on a little trip for the week and asked me to stay at the house and take care of it. I'm on summer break, so I don't have school, and I don't really have to go anywhere, but I didn't think it was appropriate to leave me at home alone and expect me to act as a watchdog. I wasn't on board with that plan and told my mother as much. I wasn't ready to stay home all day to watch the house. If she wanted security, she should have just invested in it instead of tricking me into staying home. I was also mostly upset that they hadn't even told me about their plan to go on a road trip and left me alone without any courtesy to let me know beforehand, so I could decide if I wanted to do it or not. I probably would have said yes. As a high school guy, there's nothing we want more than an empty house all to ourselves. I probably would have invited a few friends over and enjoyed it for a few days, but I was so angry that I didn't even feel like doing that, especially since I was fighting with my friends and didn't really have anyone to invite. I told my mother she needed to apologize for this. I could understand that Eddie didn't like talking to me, but the bare minimum they could do was at least tell me they were going somewhere before they left. It's not nice to just wake up one morning and realize you're all alone. She told me I was making a big deal out of it and needed to get over it, then hung up before I could respond. When I tried calling her back, she didn't answer and texted me, saying she was trying to enjoy her trip and would talk to me once she got to the hotel. I was so upset about everything that I decided to leave. I knew it meant the house would be empty, but I didn't care. I tried calling my mother again to let her know, but she didn't answer, and it went straight to voicemail. So, I locked up the house and put the keys under a potted plant, like my mother usually does, and went to my dad's place. When I arrived, my dad was surprised to see me because he expected me to stay with my mother until the end of the month. I told him everything that had been going on with Eddie and his kids, how Eddie had even trained his kids not to talk to me, and how my mother didn't care enough to address it, no matter how much it hurt me. Her excuse was that Eddie had his personal reasons, which she deemed valid, but she wasn't willing to tell me what they were, so I could make sense of what was going on. I put up with this for my mother's sake. I wanted her to be happy, and she often reminded me of the sacrifices she made for me, so I could do this for her. But it was becoming too much. I couldn't tolerate it anymore, and I was done. After venting to my father, he said he would take care of everything for me. He was obviously upset, but he didn't say anything harsh about my mother to me. He just told me he was glad I'd shared this with him and that I'd be living with him now. If I wanted to go back to my mother, it was my choice, but he didn't recommend it. For the next 5 days, I didn't try to call my mother, and the funny part was that she didn't try to call me either. The least she could have done was keep in touch with her son, whom she'd left home alone while she went off with her new family. I was hurt, but after speaking to my father, I felt considerably lighter and decided I wasn't going to let it bother me. After about 5 days with no contact, she finally called. I thought she'd check up on me, but instead, she was yelling at the top of her lungs. It took me a moment to realize she was angry because they'd been robbed. Apparently, a lot of things were missing, including their television and some expensive items. For some reason, she was blaming me. After she stopped yelling, I explained that I'd tried calling her several times to let her know I was leaving to stay with my dad, but she'd ignored my calls. She told me I could have texted her, which is fair, but I didn't do it on purpose. I was mad and thought I'd made it very clear to her. I told her she shouldn't have expected me to stay home if I didn't want to. We got into a massive argument because she believed I should have stayed home no matter how upset I was, since this was a matter of safety, and she'd been counting on me. But I hadn't agreed to that in the first place. These were the consequences of her choices, not mine. I found it very ridiculous that they were trying to blame all of this on me, including Eddie. The first time he spoke to me in the last couple of years, it was only to yell at me and blame me for my carelessness. He said a couple of other very confusing things as well, like he had always known that I would be the cause of ruin for them. I don't even know what that is supposed to mean because we don't interact. I don't know how he came to that conclusion without even speaking to me. Anyway, my parents are now fighting because my dad thinks that this is my mom's fault, and so do I, but she thinks that this is my fault. Now my mother is demanding that my father pay her for the damages, since she thinks that if he is defending me for doing this, he should be ready to pay the price for it. I don't understand what to do now, and she will only drop it if I at least apologize to her and her family. I don't want to do that, but I also don't want her to keep bothering my father either. Am I in the wrong for leaving my mother's house unoccupied to go live with my father because she and my stepdad left me home alone to go on a trip with his family without even bothering to inform me? Update. So, it has been 2 weeks since the incident, and a lot of things have come to light since then. First of all, I was finally able to figure out why Eddie hated me so much. Apparently, as it turns out, when they had first started dating, Eddie had asked my mother if he could bring his mother over to live with them. My mom had said no because she was not comfortable with the idea of them moving in together so soon, and definitely not okay with the idea of her ailing mother-in-law coming to live with her. She thought that it would be too much work for her and was not up for it, even though Eddie had made it very clear that his mother had a full-time nurse to look after her and she just needed people around for her emotional needs. My mother was already not ready to move in with Eddie and be together, and she did not want the extra baggage of having her mother-in-law live with her. But instead of being upfront with him, she pinned it all on me. This was about 3 months into their relationship. They were getting pretty serious about each other at that point, even though I think it was way too soon for them. But anyway, that's my mother's choice, and I don't want to comment on that. She had basically lied to Eddie and told him that she would be okay with him moving in with her and bringing his mom and kids along to live with us, but she was not sure if it was such a good idea because of me. She had made me sound like some juvenile delinquent and told him that she had dated a couple of men in the past, but they had all been driven away because of me. Apparently, I terrorized her boyfriend because I wanted to protect her and keep everybody away since I still believed I could reunite my parents, and she did not want to break my heart. She also did not want Eddie's mother to suffer because of me, because she had told him that I had a lot of comments to make about his family. She had told Eddie that I had referred to his mother as a useless burden on the family and that I had told her that if she moved in with us, then I would make sure that she suffered for it, something that I would never say because that's just not me, and I know how insensitive it is. Apparently, I had referred to his kids as little evil goblins who were going to ruin our family. Obviously, after that, he had stopped interacting with me at all because he did not want anything to do with me. He had actually believed my mother, even though I had always acted very normally around him, and he had no reason to believe her. I found out about it a couple of days ago, since Eddie had been pushing my mother to disown me and cut all ties with me because of what I had done, and he thought that it was about time. But she did not want to do that, so she finally had to come clean to him. And now they are living separately because Eddie could not believe that he had been treating me so badly over a bunch of lies that my mother had fed him just because she was too afraid to tell him the truth, that it was she who was against having his sick mother live with them and not me. In that email, he even mentioned that he would not have had an issue if my mother had been honest with him and told him that she did not have the bandwidth to deal with a sick person in the house. He would have just spoken to his sister and made sure that they took turns taking care of their mom. But she chose to lie to him and made up such a horrible story about me that he believed and kept mistreating me. He sent me an email to apologize for everything that he had put me through and hoped that I would forgive him. I have not responded to it yet because I don't know how to feel about any of this right now, and I just want to keep my head clear and not think about any of this at the moment. But anyway, that's why he had been mistreating me for so long and my mother had been allowing it. In fact, it had been working out in her favor perfectly, and she had been feeding him all sorts of lies about how I kept getting in trouble at school, and he never even questioned it because he trusted her blindly. We never spoke, so he never found out that I was actually quite a normal guy, and that kept my mother's cover from getting blown. She is one twisted lady. I have to say that my father is now filing for full custody after we got to know all of this, and my mother is devastated because she claims that she loved us and wanted us to be a happy family together. But I'm sorry, you can't have a happy family on your own terms and ruin everybody else's life. Apparently, not only is my dad filing for full custody, but Eddie is also filing for divorce. I found out because my mother sent my dad a bunch of messages begging him to talk to Eddie and fix this because she can't live without all of us. I don't know how she even expects us to listen to her after everything that she did. She made sure that I was treated slyly and did not have a problem with it for so many years, knowing that she had been lying through her teeth about me to her husband. I would pray that no person ever has to suffer something like this at the hands of their own mother. I kept wondering about what I did wrong and why I was being hated by her husband and his family for no reason. All this while, she just cared about herself and nothing else. I have blocked her everywhere, and I don't want to speak to her ever again. I had been putting up with a lot of crap for the past few years just because I loved her and wanted her to be happy. Clearly, she did not feel the same way about her own son and only cared about her own happiness. So that makes two of us. Both of us put her happiness first. Well, not anymore. Edit. It's official, Eddie has filed for divorce. That is literally all that people are talking about right now, my family and a couple of common friends that my parents had. My mother is dealing with this in a very weird way by posting sad quotes on social media, which I have been receiving screenshots of from my cousins. I don't know what she expects, but that's definitely not going to help. She dug her grave, and now she has to lie in it. My dad has full custody of me now. It has been a couple of months, and my mother put up a good fight, but unfortunately, the divorce and everything made it super complicated for her, and we had all the proof of what she had put me through. So she really didn't stand a chance, but her lawyer managed to stretch the case out for a couple of months at the very least. Anyway, I don't have to visit my mother now if I don't want to because my dad is the custodial parent. She does get visitation rights, but I don't know what the point of that is since I don't even want to talk to her anymore. I am happy with my father, and life is going pretty well. I have even made up with my friends, and I'm looking forward to moving on.